Yeah, I would spend my break time. Most people would go to the break room. I would spend it with the glove makers and just ask them how they're doing this and that. It wasn't so much that I learned a trade secret from my time there. It was more that I got to see behind the curtain. And just like seeing The Wizard of Oz, you realize how much is smoke and mirrors, how it kind of gave me a confidence boost. Like if these guys can do it, I could do it too.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Beyond the Glove. I am your host, Ben Loafman. So the market of baseball and softball gloves is one that is often dominated by giants in the industry. You have your Rawlings, Wilsons, Mizunos, Maruccis, and more. But for every one of the giants, there are handfuls of smaller brands that are working in hopes of being recognized among the monoliths one day. Today's guest on our podcast is a rare breed in the sense that he's been amongst both the mammoths and the fledglings of the glove trade. Most recently, he moved away from glove design at a large brand and due to restrictions, pivoted his business momentarily. But he's able to freely build gloves again, and we're excited as ever to have him on this podcast to get his story and see what's in store for him. Scott Carpenter, welcome to the show, man.
I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. We're excited to have you. So, Scott, I feel like the best place to start, you have a pretty fascinating career up to this point right now. And if you wouldn't mind, before we get going, could you give us a brief snapshot of all that you've done in your career?
Yeah, I'll try to make it brief. There's a lot of ups and downs, and but I'm a maker, and I make baseball gloves. And I went to art and design schools. After that, I was fully immersed in the New York City art world, and I was deeply entrenched, making paintings, making objects, exhibiting in Chelsea and Soho. The artwork actually led me into making baseball gloves as I got more and more complex with my object making. I left Manhattan. I moved to Ava, Missouri. That's in the southwest corner of Missouri, not too far south from where you are, Ben. And and I went there to work at a Rawlings glove factory where they're still making gloves. This was in the year 2000. I worked with Bob Clevenhagen down there. I started tinkering and making my own gloves on the side, outside of my job with Rawlings. I then moved to Cooperstown, New York, to study the evolution of baseball glove design from the earliest fingerless versions to the present day and projecting towards what the future gloves might be. I made set an early goal for myself to try to make the first non-leather glove used in a Major League Baseball game. That's where I saw the future heading. So in Cooperstown, I started selling gloves under the Carpenter brand, and did that for a number of years, getting better and better, making each glove by hand until the point where pro players were using it. And in 2011, I accomplished my goal when Brian Gordon, a starting pitcher for the New York Yankees, used the first non-leather glove made in a Major League Baseball game, a Carpenter glove that I made. From that point, I did a pivot, not so much focused on materials, but focused on innovation and performance. And I introduced something called CMOD, standing for Carpenter Modified, where players would send me their existing gloves, leather gloves, and I would gut them out and put in my own innovation, send it back to them. My first customer was Ben Zobrist. This was in 2016. And that started to gain a lot of attention. That led to an acquisition from Marucci, and they acquired my business. It came with a 5-year minimum working contract. I was their glove designer for 5 years, and helped grow that brand. But after the minimum 5-year period, I opted out of my contract. I wanted to do some more creative things in this field. I did have a non-compete, so during my non-compete time, I focused on catcher thumb guards. I started a brand called Nexguard, and we make the best thumb guards in baseball right now. There's a number of major leaguers that are using these thumb guards in their mitts. And but now that my non-compete is ending, I'm getting back into a deep dive into mitt and glove design, starting with catcher mitts, integrating the thumb guards with mitt design so that they actually work together. And then the ultimate goal is to start a new glove brand and again, focus on innovation and performance.
Nice. Well, thank you for sharing all that. That's a ton of experience and education all crammed into 3 minutes. So
It's
thank
a
you
lot.
for.
I was trying again and again to reduce it down. It was hard, but I got it down to about 3 minutes. So there you
I
go.
think you got it all in there too. So, but no, when I hear your profile, I feel like we often hear from when you were in art school and were educated. But I'm always interested to know. So, like, when and where did you fall in love with baseball that got you to this point today? Where did a young Scott Carpenter love baseball for the first time?
Man, so I grew up in Creve Coeur, Missouri. That's where I was
Okay.
born, and going to the St. Louis Cardinals, and Ozzie Guillen and Rawlings is down there in that history, and then moved
Hmm.
up to the Chicago burbs, where I was in the northwest suburbs called Barrington, and they just had good baseball. There was like
Hmm.
everyone played it. I had two older brothers. We'd go out in the backyard and play, and there's something great about this sport that I don't get from other sports, and it's just I just grew a love of the game through playing.
Hmm. No, very all the inaction allows for a lot of contemplative work to happen in your mind
Yeah.
when with baseball. Were you as a kid? Were you always into your gear right from the beginning? Were you acquiring gloves and things like that, or was it kind of a gradual progression where you fell in love with gloves?
Yeah, I I mean, I guess I was inclined to be a gearhead, but I
Hmm.
didn't have any budget to be a gearhead. So uh, yeah, I had the hand-me-downs from my older brothers. My first glove was a hand-me-down Rawlings Reggie Jackson autographed glove, and that I still have today, and I have my boys use it. So yeah, so that's my history with the first glove.
That's fun. I always remember. So my first, I've shown it on the podcast before, but the first glove that I own that I still have in my possession was a Rawlings. I had King Griffey Jr. on it. I think I showed you at the ABCA. I actually
Yeah,
turned it into a wallet. It was kind of a floppy glove and wasn't going to do much. So I figured that the wallet would be cooler. Maybe my kids will be more inclined to take that from me than an old floppy glove.
yeah.
But nice. How long did you play baseball for? Were you like up through high school or college?
Oh gosh, so I played. I think that my best year looking back was when I was in what they call Pony League,
Uh huh.
which was like seventh and eighth graders, and I was the MVP on the championship team and just
Nice.
loving life. And then in high school, I didn't get along with my coach, and I quit the team mid-season, and I regret it to this day. But that's just kind of the independent nature I had. I was a bit
Hmm.
hot-headed at times, and so I could say I played college ball because I went to art school, and Rhode
Uh
Island
huh.
School of Design had the Cats and Dogs, which was just a bunch of artists that would like have fun out on the field and
Uh huh.
bring the beer up with them
There you go.
and pitch from the mound. And I did that, and then I played a men's league for about 15 years here in Cooperstown. There's a men's league,
Okay.
so that's my history of playing.
That's fun. With the Cooperstown Men's League, I wonder this because of just the roots of baseball being centered there. Was it old town ball style, or is it just like men's regular league playing by today's rules?
Well, there are two leagues. So
Okay.
there's the regular men's league. It was a wood and bat league,
Hmm.
which not unlike other men's leagues across the country. But there is an old style baseball game they have at one of the museums here where they play the old rules, no gloves, and
Uh-huh.
I've done that one time.
Okay.
But very different, like an interesting experience, but not something that I would want to do as a league, year after year.
It's wild. I feel like every once in a while come across an article that profiles one of those leagues. It is pretty. I'm glad that people are doing it. I don't know that I would, but
Yeah.
it is cool to see people preserve that part of the game.
Well, for me, it's all about the glove, right? So,
That's
like,
true.
I
Yeah.
would tinker, I'd make a prototype, and I'd bring it to the field and
Uh huh.
literally field test it like minutes after I finished making it.
Uh huh.
So, to do the old town ball where they're not using gloves didn't attract me.
Yeah. That makes complete sense. Going back though, so after you stopped playing in early high school, As far as gloves go, did you kind of forget about gloves for a little bit and just focus on art all the way through college, or was that always kind of something? Or was baseball still? Did it still have a place in your heart even
Yeah,
during
I
those
kind of
years?
put my glove away, and
Hmm.
I would bring it with me. It was always with me to college, but yeah, I kind of got away from playing for a few years,
Hmm.
but jumped at the chance when I saw the RISD Cats and Dogs playing. I'm like, I gotta play in that, and then jumped on the men's league when it came to Cooperstown.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, so yeah, I guess my love for gloves came at a later date.
Yeah. Well, cool. So you mentioned as you were talking about your career, so you did the New York art scene, and then you decided that you were going to go to Ava, Missouri to work for Rawlings. What was kind of the tipping point that made you arrive in Ava, Missouri?
I I mean, Rawlings was it, right? I grew up
Hmm.
in St. Louis and had my first Rawlings glove, and just felt like I needed to do that. But so I'll tell the story how I got the job at Rawlings,
Okay.
which is a fun story I like to repeat.
Yeah.
Which is, I mean, I just had this crazy idea as an artist, in New York City, wanting to design and make baseball gloves, right? And there's like, you can't just you can't just walk into a job like that. Um, but I did send out the application to Rawlings that I wanted to be a glove designer and I wanted to work for Rawlings. And I just got back, I think, like a Xerox copy rejection letter that they probably pulled from a drawer, sent it back to me. So it went nowhere. But I'm the entrepreneurial type that no is only the beginning of a conversation. And so I left Manhattan, moved to Ava, Missouri, and got a cheap motel lot, and then walked into the front door of the Ava, Missouri Rawlings plant and said, "I'm a local looking for work."
Ooh, there you go.
And that got me the job. Whereas in the first
Uh-huh.
time when I sent the application to Rawlings, man, I listed all my career achievements, right? Which included like Yale University, Columbia University, like my artwork was just, I got favorable reviews from top New York City art critics in the New York Times. All that stuff means
Mhm.
nothing to the baseball world, right? They could care less about that. So
Uh-huh.
it was great just to walk through the front door and just say, I'm a local looking for a job. And so they gave me jobs. And the jobs were, man, anything from like destroying bats that got recalled to being a
Uh-huh.
night janitor to being doing data entry on sending stuff out the door. It was such a contrast from the New York City art world and living in Manhattan to doing that. It was one of the better experiences of my life, just having those kind of life experiences.
That is cool. You probably saw all the nitty-gritty that people don't think about for running a glove company. Seems like you got indoctrinated pretty well into all that with, chopping up bats or doing the data entry and that sort of stuff.
Yeah, and I mean, it gets, they say get your foot in the door, right? It got my foot in the
Mhm.
door, and it got me like the relationship with Bob Clevenhagen and just talking glove
Mhm.
design with him, and actually being one of the better jobs I had was being the night janitor, because
Okay.
suddenly like I had full access to the whole floor by myself
Mhm.
at night and can tinker with the machinery and figure stuff out on my own. Um, yeah, it was a great time there.
That's cool. So I feel like we need to set the scene for everybody with what Ava, Missouri is. So I was looking, I looked this up because I was kind of fascinated. I found a picture of the building and I wanted to learn more. So in 1959, so like Scott mentioned, Ava, Missouri is basically 3 hours south of Kansas City, Missouri, where I am right now. And in 1959, Rawlings was looking for a new building to manufacture. I think to start, they were going to do golf bags and football gear. In Ava, Missouri, that has a population of a couple thousand residents at the most, responded and they actually won out a bidding process to get the plant in their town, which was kind of a miracle that they got it. Because as Scott mentioned, Ava's not a suburb of St. Louis. It's a 3.5 hour drive from St. Louis, and it's in this single story red brick building that and if you're looking at it from a certain vantage point, it kind of looks like an old school is kind of how I thought as looking through the picture. But the gloves eventually came there, as you can attest to with your experience. And I thought this was a very cool quote about the Ava plant, was that if you read any well-researched history of the baseball glove, and you will read about Ava. There was a time when big leaguers were calling Ava to get their favorite glove reworked or recreated by the Rawlings factory. So you were a part of that. That's pretty cool that you were able to work there. And I mean, you've made your own name as within baseball glove history, but that's cool that you were also a part of Rawlings as well. So congrats on that.
I lucked out because it was like the final year before they closed the factory and moved all
Okay.
glove manufacturing out of the country. So I got that last little bit of time there and working with Bob Clevenhagen. My understanding is that factory used to make 500 gloves a day. And when I was there,
Really?
they were down to, I don't know, probably 10 to 50 gloves a day.
Okay.
But still, I was able to get that time in. And also, when they closed down the factory, they sold off all their machines on pennies on the dollar. So I got
Okay.
some great machinery that would have costed me like 15, 20 grand. I got it for like
Uh-huh.
$100. And
Really?
so that was also good timing that worked out.
That's cool. And you had mentioned that, so when you were there, you were kind of doing odd jobs and just kind of helping out as you could. Were you on your lunch break just kind of striking up conversations with the people that were constructing gloves and just asking them any or gleaning anything you could from them in regard to like the glove making process?
Absolutely. And there's a lot of little tips that and nuances and finessing that goes on. And it really helped just to talk to people that have done it their whole career and getting tips
Hmm.
and getting, yeah, I would spend my break time. Most people would go to the break room. I would spend it with the glove makers and just ask them how they're
Uh-huh.
doing this and that. Um, but really, my experience wasn't so much that I learned a trade secret from my time there. It was more
Hmm.
that I got to see behind the curtain, and just like seeing the
Yeah.
Wizard of Oz, you realize how much is smoke and mirrors, and how
Hmm.
how easy how it kind of gave me a confidence boost. Like if these guys can do it, I could do it too.
Uh-huh. That is pretty neat. So, and then at night, or I guess at night when you were doing the night, did you just ask them? You're like, "Hey, can I just work on the machines?" And were they all down for you to just tinker as you needed at night and things like that?
I can't say that I asked permission. I think it's better sometimes to ask for
Forgiveness.
forgiveness rather than permission. So
Th-
yeah, I mean, I had the whole floor to myself with no one around. So of course, yeah, I'm gonna
Uh-huh.
tinker around and figure some stuff out. And
That's all.
yeah,
Go ahead.
I mean, I was good. I left things as I saw them.
Uh-huh.
But it was great to be able to get hands on, which I couldn't do during the day on my other jobs there.
Nice. And you've mentioned him a couple times, similar to, I mentioned that newspaper article that said Ava has such a cemented place in baseball glove history. You got to build a little bit of a relationship with Bob Clevenhagen, similar to Ava. If you look up baseball glove history, at some point you're going to get Bob Clevenhagen and then the Latinas who preceded him in the job. Was he working in Ava while you were there? Was he there all the time?
He was there. He had an office. Yeah, I would go to his office, hang out with him during like lunch break, and talk gloves
Uh-huh.
and glove design. Yeah.
They call him the Michelangelo of the mitts sometimes. I always love that.
Wow.
And
Yeah.
there's some really cool stories I know with him and Omar Vizquel. So if Omar Vizquel, I think after a certain point, every single Rawlings glove that he got was unstamped in the palm because one time he told Rawlings they needed a mitt, and Bob Clevenhagen was like, "I can get you a Rawlings mitt right now. It's not going to have the snorting bowl in the palm, but you can have it at this point before that finish gets put on." And he got it, loved the glove, and then for the rest of his career, I believe Omar Vizquel always chose to get a Rawlings glove with no palm stamp in it because of that. So there's just tons of cool little stories and stuff like that that are sprinkled from his experience there at Rawlings.
Yeah, he's full of stories of different players and different tweaks in the gloves, and it's great, and it's too bad we don't have more of that manufacturing in this country anymore.
Yep. So after Ava, Missouri, so you got luggage in hand, glove knowledge in your brain. Where did you go next right after that? You told us already, but go ahead and tell us again.
Well, yeah, I told you the short version. The longer version is that
Yeah.
I went to an artist residency up in the Adirondacks in upstate New York, and there was a writer there that looked at my work, which included baseball, and on her own decided to get me an appointment with the head curator at the Baseball Hall of Fame because she thought the Hall of Fame just needed to know about this work I was doing. So
Uh-huh.
I went up from the Adirondacks down to Cooperstown. It was my first time to Cooperstown, and I just realized the potential. So I moved to
hmm
Cooperstown. It's no better place to study the evolution of baseball glove design than the Hall of Fame and see the collection from the earliest fingerless versions to the current day and be able to project towards the future. And so I
hmm
did that. I decided the future gloves were going to be lighter, they're going to be more ergonomic, they were going to be more advanced materials than the traditional leathers that had been used. And so I set out to lead in all those areas with a new brand called Carpenter Trade, and
hmm
and pursued that because of my study at the Hall of Fame.
hmm And it's pretty cool. I've seen some of your posts that you've put up on Instagram. When you get that, when someone like yourself is able to get that personal tour, the being able to see those gloves is really neat because you pull them. It's almost like a small shoebox. They pull them out, and you're having to wear gloves and things like that to hold these gloves and kind of see all of those. There's some pretty impressive gloves that you're able to view as well.
It's incredible, and every glove has a story, right? And you experience that when you're in the archives of the Baseball Hall of Fame down in their storage area, and they're pulling those
hmm
boxes out, and they open it up, and then every glove has this rich story that's just fascinating. It's something that
hmm
makes gloves unique, and that's like unique about gloves. It's I think unlike any other sports equipment, and
hmm
it's great to be by the Hall of Fame because they appreciate that, and it's something I appreciate it, and there's just endless avenues you could go down on the history, the rich history of gloves in this area. I know you had Casey Mack on before, and he was talking about
hmm
Denkert up in Gloversville. And
Yeah.
so after that episode you did with him, I was talking to Casey about it, and my own time visiting the old Denkert factory in
Uh-huh.
Gloversville, which is just an hour north of here, and how gloves used to
Yeah.
be manufactured. There's so many rich stories that included with baseball that makes not only baseball unique, but also just baseball gloves really unique item.
Mhm. I would recommend everybody if you type it if you look at Scott's Instagram page as well, you've documented a couple of your trips to those locations, and the original buildings are, although not purposed for manufacturing anymore, they're still there, aren't they? Maybe as apartment buildings or things like that?
Yeah, they're still there, and it's just amazing. Like I went through a few mile radius, and there was like
Mhm.
three glove brands that we visited, but there are many more that were kind of smaller and undocumented.
Uh-huh.
And a place called Gloversville. I mean, come on, it's
Yeah.
like it's just a great story up there.
That's only in baseball does that happen. They're not making basketballs in Basketballville or anything like that. That's a baseball story right there. So that's
Absolutely.
cool. So you realize, so you make that decision. You say, all right, synthetics are that's going to be the future of baseball gloves. And where do you start? I'm interested to know, where do you start after that? Are you just ordering kind of random materials and seeing what works best for a baseball glove at that point?
Yeah, and I mean, other glove companies have tried to do this. I think Nike tried to do it in other
Mhm.
places. They failed.
Yeah.
I was just persistent and gritty about it. The biggest hurdle I had to overcome was just the minimum order quantity, right? Because
Ooh.
synthetics are
Mhm.
a man-made material, but the to be profitable for the makers of microfibers and the different varieties, they have to make large quantities. And so they're primarily just working with the Nikes and the Wilsons of the world that can cover that. A small guy like me trying to make synthetic gloves on our own has a big hurdle getting around those MOQs. So I had a breakthrough after a number of years. I was getting success and pro players were using my gloves. And at some point, the manufacturers of the microfiber that I was working with realized like I could open the floodgates to a whole new industry for them if only they would work with me and wipe away their minimum order quantities, give me the stuff I need to my specs. That took years to get to that point, but once I developed that relationship and got past that hurdle, made a world of difference in the quality and the characteristics you want in a baseball gloves. I was able to get that suddenly, and then had the breakthrough of like getting to the major leaguers and having those used. Because you have to understand, like I broke through with the Yankees in a starting pitcher. The Yankees probably get more glove contract money than any other team. And the starting pitcher probably gets the most of any other player because they're the ones that have the glove up to their hand, to their face. And on the TV, they got the logo nice and big for everyone, right? So to break through with the starting pitcher for the Yankees, he could probably make, I don't know, 100 grand with any brand he wants. But for me, not paying $1, I had to make the quality of the glove good enough to perform better, to give them an advantage, to make that player wear it in a game. And so, so I think that's why I made the transition after reaching my goal of the first non-leather glove. I focused away from the material so much and just focused on performance and innovation because I had a lot of unique things and trade secrets I was putting into gloves, and kind of went in that direction afterwards.
Think about if you get another one on the mound today with all the media coverage. It's gonna be big for you. I see it coming for you. I hope so. So, one thing I was gonna ask. So I'm gonna guess a lot of our listeners out there, they may not have gotten their hands on one of your all synthetic gloves before. What does it feel like? How would you describe it as far as the feel of the glove goes?
So it looks about the same, but this is an all synthetic Carpenter glove. This is an outfield model. And the biggest difference you're going to notice is there's a microfiber in the palm. Microfiber literally translates to small fibers, right? So it has a fibrous, toothy feel, maybe similar to a suede, this feel of a suede leather. And that's kind of nice in that it helps the ball deaden a little bit with the spin of the ball and having kind of a what I call a toothy or fine fiber feel when you're catching that. You're going to notice very light. This is an outfield glove, 13 inches. It weighs only between 16 and 17 ounces, which is crazy. If you compare a leather glove of the same size, it'd probably be 5 to 8 ounces heavier than this. And that advantage is huge. Outfielder might run over 40 yards to make a catch. And with the glove being at the extremity of the hand, the amount of movement, it makes a big difference on that 40-yard dash. So there's a lot of unique features to the all synthetic glove that, I still believe that at some point in the future, most major leaguers will want non-leather gloves. And whether that's, 20 years from now or 100 years from now, I don't know, but I'm still thinking that's going to happen at some point. And, and they'll be able to look back at that point and think about who made that first one. And I will have that and with that glove that's in the Hall of Fame right now.
That's really cool. One question that I have, and I apologize, I didn't prepare you for this, but I just thought of it as we were sitting here. So you mentioned the weight. So your glove, that outfield glove you were holding right there, it's about roughly 1 pound and 1 ounce. You said around 16, 17 ounces.
Yep.
And you said that a leather glove will be anywhere from 5 to 8 ounces heavier usually. Is that correct?
Yes.
Do you know when is a player able to like know, like if they put one glove to the next, where can they notice the amount of difference in weight between two gloves?
Well, um, that's what they'll notice when they're here in my shop, and they'll
Okay.
handle one of these and handle a leather glove right next to it, and they'll be like, "Oh my gosh,"
Yeah.
immediately noticeable. For the player on the field, um, I've had so many players that they transition to a much lighter synthetic glove, and they do their
Hmm.
bullpens or they do whatever field work they're doing, and they just get used to the weight. And then
Yeah.
maybe they switch on their leather glove at the end of practice or something, and then suddenly, like it's a revelation. They didn't realize, oh my gosh, what the difference of 5 to 8 ounces is huge,
Hmm.
and it makes a difference about how fast your glove can move to defensively. For a pitcher that's focused on his mechanics, repeating those mechanics and putting all his energy into his throwing motion and not on this
Hmm.
glove hand weighing him down. For the
Hmm.
outfielder doing the 40-yard dash, so
Yeah.
there's many advantages to having the lighter weight.
Yeah. No, for sure. I completely agree. Um, it's real very impressive. Just all the benefits that those gloves do offer. And I actually got the opportunity at ABCA. I was able to throw one on my hand, and it was a very cool feel. And you mentioned that it kind of feels suede, and that was the way that I would kind of describe the feeling of the catching surface of the glove, which I thought was a cool feel for sure. As far as most baseball fans out there, I think you mentioned this a little bit. I think they'd be tickled at the amount of big leaguers that you've been able to connect with over the years. When big leaguers, when they get the gloves from you and you present them, is it usually that kind of what you just described there? That, oh gosh, how is this so much lighter than my usual glove? Is that usually the response you get?
Yeah, it's that, and it's great just how genuine the responses are. They
Hmm.
became kids again, like on opening a gift on Christmas Day, just like
Uh huh.
full of like awe and the potential. The players develop a relationship with their gloves that's unique
Hmm.
amongst sports equipment. So. And then I've always been focused on innovation and performance. So there's always something in there inside the glove, beyond just the material that's
Hmm.
really like game changers and players really pick up on and appreciate.
Hmm. And then when you started reaching out to those big leaguers, were you having to bird dog quite a bit? Were you having to be like, "Hey, try this glove," or did they just start coming to you right away, or did you have to work pretty hard to get in those clubhouses?
Well, I did the full spectrum from the early days where it's like I didn't have a chance, any
Uh-huh.
chance of getting these guys converted. But I was confident that I could keep doing it, and through just year after year developing relationships, getting better and better every time. Eventually I was able to make it to the bigs.
Uh-huh.
Like I went through my own journey, just like every player that makes it to the big has his own story of grit and determination. And I feel like I did that just as a glove designer. Um,
Mhm.
so it's great to get to a point where finally, like I have the access and I have the relationships and I can meet with these guys. Um,
Uh-huh.
but it took many years to get to this point.
Yeah. So Brian Gordon, you mentioned him earlier, New York Yankees pitcher. So he is the first player to use an all synthetic glove in a Major League Baseball game. So was it an easy sell to get him to wear it in a game, or was he nervous about it at all?
So the story that was relayed to me was I had other teammates of his, most notably Michael Schwimmer at the time with the Phillies that were teammates
Hmm.
of his, and the story I got was Schwimmer went through a lot of flack for wearing a synthetic glove and a lot of teasing
Really?
in the clubhouse, and
Huh.
um, and that included Brian Gordon, but Brian Gordon just like was curious and just picked his brain. Michael Schwimmer is he's very methodical and scientific in his approach.
Hmm.
And so he just made the case to Brian, and it made sense to Brian, the advantages it was going to give him as a pitcher. And
Hmm.
and so he went from teasing him in the clubhouse to wearing a glove himself. And then, so it's great. It was word of mouth that led to the
Uh-huh.
first player to use it at the major league level.
That's pretty cool. You didn't have to put on any hard marketing shtick or anything like that. It worked out itself.
Yeah.
Uh, so June 16th, 2011, that was the date that Brian Gordon wore that first synthetic glove on the mound at New York Stadium for the New York Yankees. Was that a dramatic day for you? Were you able to attend in person?
Absolutely. It was just a magical day. It was like I've been working at this goal for like 10 years at that point. And
Uh-huh.
and you think there's 30 major league teams, right? I'm in
Hmm.
Cooperstown, New York. The stadium that's closest to me is Yankee Stadium. And I lived in
Uh-huh.
New York City for 10 years too. So like to have it be a Yankee, to have it being a starting pitcher, to have it like all developed the way it did was just a magical moment. I was able to go down to the game. I had some connections. I got tickets, and
Hmm.
um, and attend the game and just see my long term goal like happen right in front of me was absolutely fantastic. I can't put it into words really.
That's awesome. I'm glad to hear that story. I was really hoping that you weren't going to say, "Oh no, I woke up the next day to like 17 texts or something like that." That they did they profile it on like the Yes Network or something like that while he was on the mound that day?
Um, I was told that the broadcasters got a press release from the Hall of Fame about this
Oh,
moment,
okay.
and and so they spoke about it on air. And then, more importantly, a writer from the AP,
Okay.
Associated Press, caught wind and did a whole story on it, and
Uh-huh.
that went viral. You can imagine the attention that that kind of headline could grab, and so it did.
Uh-huh.
And that AP story went, around the country, around the world, um, and you know, and it was amazing because it was just me in my like little home studio
Uh-huh.
making gloves, and to get like a viral story like that it was just amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's very cool. Congratulations.
Thank you.
So, kind of playing off of Brian Gordon as well, you'd mentioned this player as well. I love this guy for obvious reasons, but Ben Zobrist has sent you gloves as well. And how did he connect with you?
So that was totally random. He just emailed me out of the blue.
Okay.
And he was very aware of my Instagram and realized I was doing something special. And he is the personality that like is always thinking about like what can I do better? Where can I get an edge? How can I do it? Most major leaguers they get a bit standoffish once they get to the major league level, but
Hmm.
Ben Zobrist is just one of the rare breed that is continuing to seek out and being very humble and wanted to see what I could do with him and wanted to start working with me. I started making him gloves and started modifying his gloves. It got there was a tanglement with this Rawlings contract and what he could and couldn't do, and so we
Uh-huh.
worked around some of those things. But yeah, I think I just owe it to Instagram. Like the players they follow, they're on to these trends and they realize
Uh,
what's going on. Yeah.
yeah. Go ahead and explain what you did with Ben Zobrist's glove. So it was you didn't make him an all synthetic glove. You did something a little different, which I think is cool and resourceful. What was it that you did?
Right. So again, I turned away from like just the focus on material and just focus on innovations that I did. Uh, so I modified his glove and I started this thing called C-Mod.
Hmm.
And he would send the gloves directly from the Rawlings factory to me. I would
Hmm.
completely gut out the glove, and I would put in my own innovations and materials and designs inside his gloves, reconstruct it, put it back together, and send it back to him. So I made it more ergonomic. I made it lighter. I made a better shape to the catching area so the ball would funnel into the pocket better. I would increase the leverage, increase the grip. There's a number of things that were just innovative with baseball gloves that I could make his glove perform better for him and give him an advantage on the field.
So the CMOD technology, for those who aren't completely aware, I've had the ability to put on one of these gloves before. It's fantastic when you put your hand in the glove. It's the glove inside the glove feel. It contours perfectly to your hand as you stick it in there, and it really, you have a ton of leverage closing the glove. It's a very impressive technology. So, and that's what Ben Zobrist chose to go with. It's a pretty cool story for you. I think I read some of his comments. It was from a What Pros Wear post from 2017, and they were asking Ben Zobrist. They were saying they're asking him, I think maybe a question about how how do players think about the gloves that they're using. Ben's quote was, "It is more important that the player is confident with the product than the actual product itself." Which leads us into our next topic of conversation. So, which is kind of efficient glove design. So, Scott, you make fantastic gloves that are lightweight and efficient, but players will sometimes reject the gloves. Why is that?
So I'm sure you're aware of how much training professional baseball players go through, and if they're a shortstop every day, they get on the field early, they're taking ground balls, they're transitioning to the throwing hand, they're throwing to first, they're throwing to second, and they do that repetitive motion. I don't know, hundreds, thousands of times a day, every single day, year after year. So they get a muscle memory where whatever glove they happen to be using, the ball hits the edges, it funnels into the pocket in a certain way in that pattern that player chose to wear. And when he has the muscle memory of how that funnels and how it transitions and how it throws, that makes whatever glove he's used to, whatever patterns he's used to, the right pattern for him. And when you introduce a different pattern that funnels differently, it's just not going to be right for him. And it doesn't matter if me as a designer knows that there's some advantage to a different pattern. It doesn't matter. He has the muscle memory from years of training that just negates whatever design advantage I might present to them. So, so that's it. That's I guess that's one of the reasons why. Yeah.
And then as far as like that baseline that the players have built for themselves over the years, do you see that the CMOD in the all synthetic design, do you see that at some point becoming the baseline for players in the near future?
Well, they're two different things, CMOD and all
True.
synthetics, right? So
Yes.
I've done a pivot away from the all synthetic gloves and primarily work with leather and Horween leathers and things with the gloves I'm making now. But the CMOD as a baseline, I mean, there's a larger trend towards customization and personalization and more towards the individual that I think will continue. So when I left and went to Ava, Missouri, like I couldn't believe and wrap my head around the fact that some of the biggest names in baseball were using a one-size-fits-all glove that was identical to the glove you get at the sporting goods store, at least in terms of the pattern and the shape of it. Like I just
Yeah.
assumed there was some level of tailoring or customizing more for the pros. And so, I decided to take it to the next level to the point where I was either life casting their hand or I was doing a 3D scan of their hand to really tailor and narrow it down. So that's something that's hard to scale, and I could do it for a few players. But as far as the baseline, I think there's still a push towards personalization, customization, and getting maybe more of a tailored fit feel, but not to the level of like a 3D scan of their hand and what I do now. But yeah, when you say baseline, that's what I think of is there is a trend towards more individual tailoring, customizing, personalization, I think you are finding more ergonomic fits that feel more like a tailored fit as gloves evolve.
Hmm. And as you move forward, kind of now that which we'll discuss here in a little bit, but you kind of have that freedom of kind of going back into glove design a little bit. Are you going to be specializing? Are you going to be looking kind of heavily towards the professional players and seeing what you can develop for them the most?
Yes, I think so.
Hmm.
And so what I could do is just focus on trade secrets or trade or patents.
Hmm.
Where when I work with pros, it's more about educating myself and tinkering and figuring out new innovations that work better.
Hmm.
But that's a costly endeavor, right?
Yeah.
And then maybe I'll leave it to the larger brands to somehow scale these innovations and they can make the money off that way, or I can patent some of these things, or I
Hmm.
can work exclusively under different contracts with different brands.
Nice. So you got quite a few options open for
Yeah.
you as you move forward. Nice. So kind of moving to recent history for you now. So 2018, your company, Carpenter Trade, was acquired by Marucci, and you spent 5 years working with them. At the time in 2018, what was the big advantage for you in letting Marucci acquire your brand?
So, um, I felt at the time that I did a lot on a shoestring budget, and
Uh-huh.
what could I do on a larger brand with the resources of a larger brand. So I mentioned before the struggles as a small independent brand of the
Hmm.
minimum order quantity, right?
Hmm.
But working with a larger brand that didn't have problems with the MOQs was a big deal. Working with the factories over in Asia and communicating with them and bringing some of my innovations into their workflow was a good learning process for me to go through.
Hmm.
Having the access to players and everything like that, those
Hmm.
were all new to me. So I got to experience that for 5 years. Those are all advantages to working with a larger brand, but there's also
Yeah.
great advantages being independent too. Like I feel the value that I bring, I could do that just tinkering on my own with a
Hmm.
minimal budget. And I don't necessarily need to be connected with a large brand to do those, develop those innovations, work with players, get the feedback, do the iterative process of making the glove again and again and again to get better, better, better each time.
Hmm.
So I'm just at a good point in my career where I could do that independently. And I
Uh-huh.
feel like I'm glad I had the 5 years with a larger brand, but I'm also glad to
Yeah.
be independent now. And I could be effective, I think, doing what I do.
Nice. That is very neat. Um, with regard to Marucci, I think during your time there, for people like myself who are very interested in gloves, I've heard this testimony from a number of people. The videos that you did with Eric Walbridge, the glove cowboy, you guys did probably a handful of videos where you guys just sat down and talked glove technology. Those are a true gift for
Yeah.
anybody that wants to know about leather, glove building. It's really cool to hear you guys sit there and riff off each other. It looked very natural, and it was very cool videos. I'd encourage anybody to look them up. They're pretty enlightening if you like gloves. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. It
Um,
was great.
yeah. And so Nexguard. So after 5 years, you were able to make a decision, and you were able to move on from Marucci and work independently again. And so you filled that time. So you can now make gloves, but you had a short period of time where you're independent and you needed a project to work on that wasn't directly a glove. Go ahead and explain that project for us here.
Yeah, so for many years, catchers have been asking me to solve this problem of catchers get thumbed and this thumb gets bent back, hyperextended, and it could happen just catching a ball with movement that's coming down, or a foul tip that catches the thumb on the glove and it rips it back. And so there's this product called catcher thumb guards that a lot of players will wear, and And I'd known about this problem for years and actually worked like, I don't know, over 10 years ago with guys like Ivan Rodriguez,
Hmm.
Carlos Ruiz, Gary Sanchez, Eric Kratz, a number of guys. And I was making them custom tailored thumb guards, and they were great. And I was getting great access with the players and getting great feedback. But the problem was I was doing life casting of their thumbs, and it would be this messy process that would take an hour of their time, and they never have an
Uh-huh.
extra hour, those guys. And
Yeah.
they were one-offs, and I couldn't really figure out how to scale that. But then comes the end of my time with Marucci, and I have an 18-month non-compete, but I couldn't work on gloves, but I could work on thumb guards. And so I tackled this issue, like how do I scale this? I know I can make a great thumb guard, but how do I scale it? And then I developed the manufacturing process to have an overlapped area that would squeeze around your thumb. You wrap it up with tape, and
Mhm. For those who aren't watching on YouTube, Scott's got his thumb guard. He's showing it to us here on the screen right now. So,
and you wrap it up with athletic tape. You get the customized fit that you need. And so you just basically have a few sizes, small, medium, large, and then you could fit everyone with a custom squeeze that you get and make a
mhm.
better thumb guard. So I developed Nexguard thumb guards, and they took off. There's a number of MLB catchers right now that wear them every game, and in a short amount of time, I was able to develop this, bring it to market, and have success with it. And now it's feeding me on how to make a better mitt, which I can do now that the non-compete has run out.
Hmm. I remember when I was in college, the catcher on our baseball team, he used the plastic white cast one, and that one always scared me. I was like, that looks like that might hurt when you. And then I've actually seen a picture that those can cause some pretty rough bone spurs, I think, right on this portion of your hand and things like that. So that's cool. Your
Yeah,
product it looks
catchers kind of
fantastic.
hate those thermoplast things that they're hard.
Okay.
Yeah, like you said, some players will develop bone spurs because of the constant rubbing there. So, I developed a lining and cushioning, a more ergonomic fit. It's just a million times better than what you could do with those thermoplast varieties, and players love it.
Mhm. And when you is it one of those products like so can you can just leave it there in your catcher's mitt, can't you? And then just slip your hand in and out pretty easily, or does the guard come out with the glove as well?
Yeah, catchers tend to leave it in, and it just
Uh-huh.
kind of pressure fits in and
Uh-huh.
stays with the mitt, and that's how most catchers wear these.
Nice. Very cool. I'd recommend everybody go check out the nextguardpro.com website. Did I say that correctly?
Yes.
And there's some great testimonies. You mentioned Eric Kratz, former MLB catcher. He has a cool testimony on there. So and there's 5 or 6 more on there. It's pretty good stuff. So now you have that freedom to begin crafting gloves of your own again. What's next for Carpenter Trade? I know you've kind of mentioned what you're looking at, but you said, is it going to be? You're just trying to make that decision if it's patents or tinkering some more and things like that.
Yeah. So, I mean, step one is just I'm doing what I did with CMOD and fielding gloves. I'm doing it with catcher mitts now, and I'm going to
Hmm.
integrate the thumb guards to work well with the mitt design.
Okay.
Instead of being two separate objects that you just pressure together, it's
Yeah.
going to be built together to lock in together to help with the leverage and everything else, the pocket, the shape of the pocket. CMOD I developed, man, over 10 years ago, and I feel like now I'm at CMOD level 10 of like
Uh-huh.
more advancement, more things that I could do to increase the performance of a catcher's mitt. So I'm going to
Hmm.
do that all under the Nexguard umbrella, but I'm
Okay.
thinking towards the next glove brand that I want to develop and do
Okay.
focus on fielding gloves and focus on more of like a dream team of partners that I want to collect and have a new innovative glove. I think that's how you compete in a saturated market is you have to innovate and you have to just be a diehard on all the facets of and the finesse that's involved in making great baseball gloves.
Nice, very cool. Well, it sounds like you got a lot to look forward to. I'm very excited for what just the rest of this 2025 is going to hold for you. Could we be seeing some of those? So there'll be Nexguard Pro mitts. Is that what these catcher's mitts will be?
Well, I think there'll be C mod, so it's a
Okay, okay,
modified mitt that's already on the market. So it could be
okay,
Rawlings,
gotcha.
Wilson, All Star, or
Mhm.
many other brands. And I'm not sure yet if we would do a NexGuard mitt, a branded
Okay,
mitt, but we might. The
okay.
world is open to a lot of possibilities. Yeah.
Nice. Well, I'm excited to see what's going to happen. So, Scott, we really appreciate you coming on and having this chat. I think this is going to be very enlightening for a number of our guests, and just sharing your story and just going deep in on the glove side. For all of our guests, before they hop off, we usually give a couple questions, kind of more personal ones, to before you sign off for the day. We call it three strikes. So, like the pitch clock, you get 20 seconds, but you can take as long as you want to answer. So for the first strike, my question is: so you're in Cooperstown, New York, and you got the Hall of Fame there. Lots of quirky baseball themed stores and restaurants as well. But what's the most underrated aspect of living in Cooperstown?
I would say that just the community that's here.
Okay.
I spent time in Ava, Missouri, and you described it a little bit, about 2,000 people. It's about the same population here. But
Hmm.
Cooperstown has a small community feel while it's still like on the world stage. Like everyone knows
Uh huh.
about Cooperstown, and we get people from all over the world and all over the country that come and visit here, and they see the culture and the great atmosphere here. So that's what I like about it. It's small town, but
Hmm.
at the same time, it's like on the world stage.
Uh
It's
huh.
a great combo that I really enjoy.
That is very unique that they're able to save save even though being on a stage, being able to save that small town homey feel is very cool. So for strike number two, what's your number one hobby when you're not crafting baseball gloves?
Oh, that would be woodworking. So.
Okay.
Um, My last name's Carpenter, so whenever I needed work, people would give me, a shelf to put in or whatever. And so I have an amateur wood shop at my house, and I got all the tools. And my father also was into working on the lathe and turning
Okay.
wood bowls and such. So woodworking, doing home projects, doing turning something on the lathe, those are all sort of hobbies I have.
Nice. And with that lathe, I'm sure that I assume you've probably cranked out a baseball bat or two in your time
Oh
as
yeah, I
well.
got I got several glove mallets over there, and over
Uh-huh.
there I have baseball bats that I've made. Um,
Uh-huh.
yeah, I would go to my men's league with a wood bat that I made myself, with a glove that I made myself, and
Uh-huh.
I never brought the balls I made myself, but I've made balls from scratch, baseballs.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
That's just the nature of being a maker and wanting to make stuff.
I'm interested as well. Have you ever done any like shoe wear or anything like that?
Yeah, I made sneakers before I
Okay.
made baseball gloves, and there's a lot of the same machinery and trade secrets. So, and that's a whole other world of like, man, sneakerheads and the people that go crazy over sneaker design. And so I
Uh-huh.
dabbled in that myself.
You'll have to. I assume you might have listened to our previous episode with Jeremy Guthrie.
Yes,
You'll need to send a pair of your sneakers into his custom cleats and see if you can get some cleats on them for yourself.
we should, and we should, man, I would, that they do something similar to CMOD where they take existing brands and modify it. I would love
Yeah.
to develop my own uppers here on the show
Uh-huh.
and send it to him to put cleats on and make his sneakers that way.
That would be cool. That'd be awesome. And then strike three. So I have to know, what is a winter like in the middle of New York?
It is long, and I mean the bottom line is I enjoy having the four seasons here and their distinct
Yeah, that's true.
seasons. I do enjoy that, but the winters are long. I'm just going to blow through the 20-second rule and give a little story about
Yeah.
that
Go
gives an
ahead, please.
example of life here, which is early on when I was going to spring training, I was I was developing new patterns from scratch, and it's like the most complex jigsaw puzzle you can imagine. And I was
Mhm.
getting late to my airplane departure, and I spent basically 3 days with very little sleep, cranking out, getting the patterns right to get the glove right to bring down to my players down in spring training,
Uh-huh.
and so these small regional airports we have in the area, Albany, New York, the 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 planes always seem to start and end their day there. So the only tickets you could get last minute are like at 5 a.m., meaning you have to get to the
Uh-huh.
airport like at 3:30 a.m. So
Uh-huh.
I worked through the night. I rushed to the airport to get there in time. And man, Cooperstown in the dead of winter at 3 a.m. is just like harsh. It's just this black and white, and there's snowdrifts blowing across the roads, and it's just like you feel like you're the dark side of Pluto or something. It's just like lifeless, nothing here.
Uh-huh.
And then so I get to the airport just in time, fall right asleep on the plane, open my eyes. I'm in spring training, Florida.
Oh man.
They give me this like bright red Mustang as a car rental, and I'm driving down there, and suddenly I wake up to just like color and life and warmth. And in spring training, it's such a great vibe because players are all in the best shape of their life, and like so happy to be there, and hope springs eternal during spring training. It's just
Uh-huh.
the flip side of like Cooperstown at the dead of winter to spring training down in Florida. So, I mean, again, I'm happy I'm here. I'm happy with the Four Seasons, but sometimes you have
Uh-huh.
experiences like that where you realize just the harsh winters that we get in upstate New York, and the atmosphere it has here. It's harsh.
Yeah. I was waiting for you that whole time to say, and then I woke up and they told us to deplane off the plane or something like that. And it was all a dream or something. But I'm glad to know that that actually happened for you. So, well, Scott, thank you very much for joining us. It was a pleasure having you on. And thank you for being so open and sharing all of your story. I know that our listeners appreciate it a bunch.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, if I could do it, anyone could do it because I started with no connections in baseball, no resources, no money. I just made the decision that I wanted to do this, and like, if I could do it, anyone can.
Nice. Thank you for that. For all your listeners out there, thanks for joining us for this episode of Beyond the Glove. If you guys want to help out the podcast, please share the podcast with any of your friends that might be interested in baseball or baseball gloves. It's we feel like the content is fun, and we think that there's a large audience that would enjoy it. If you're listening on Apple or Spotify, go ahead and give us a 5-star review. If you're watching on YouTube, go ahead and give us a thumbs up. We'd appreciate it greatly. Until next time, have a great day.